Mr. Srinivasan, and understand, Mr. Srinivasan, to what extent you feel there is still a crisis brewing or crisis of confidence. According to you, is there still a high risk of rising defaults?
See, I think what's happened over the last 6 to 12 months has been clearly a loss of confidence, and what needs to get done to make sure that trust builds in terms of a lender versus a borrower. The whole thing of trying to say that what is on the books of NBFCs is everything clean, is the numbers we see are the numbers we should go by. Increasingly day to day, you're seeing that trust coming off, and you will have to sort of give the benefit of doubt to the lender that he is not willing to take risk, he is withdrawing, and therefore when availability of funds dries up for the sector, the problems will come to the fore. When it's only in low tide, you'll know who's naked. Yeah, so that's clearly what we're seeing. And it is important that trust comes back, and that trust will come back only if a credible third party, to some extent, certifies that things are okay. And that is why I think the things of whether it's an AQR, whether it is, because the rating agencies seem to be under a cloud right now, so the ratings don't seem to be sort of something which the lenders want to go by.
Or the auditors.
So every third party who has sort of been there and whom the lenders have to some extent worked, that those are counterparties or those are stakeholders whose opinions to some extent they can go by. There's a cloud overhang as far as they are concerned, and that's something which needs to go, and that trust has to come back, and how we get the trust back as quickly as possible is going to determine how many people stand, because otherwise, as the availability sort of contracts, you will see more and more people getting weaker and weaker.
Absolutely. So what you're trying to say is that we're not out of the woods when it comes to this liquidity crisis.
There is a
risk of rising default.
Let's be clear, if the lenders are comfortable with the credit, which is an NBFC, he will get money today. So liquidity is not an issue. Liquidity is available for people who want it. The markets will give it, the banks will give it, and even whether it's foreign investors, they will give it. It's a question of availability of money is there. Banks can access whatever windows RBI provides to sort of draw down on liquidity and make sure it's provided. It's a question of whether they want to do it today or not. And I think that's the question one needs to answer. So it is, in my view, not a liquidity issue. It's a question of trust and saying, so I'm comfortable taking this risk. So that right now, the lenders are saying, I'm not comfortable taking this risk.
So many of these mega groups, IL&FS, DHFL, SL, the ADAG group, we've seen so much pain and concerns continuing. Do you expect it to get worse even for them, or do you actually see this, filtering further to bringing in other companies and other groups, because that's also the fear in the market?
So clearly, the market is pricing in these risks. If you look at equities, what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and the events, it's pricing in those risks. From the company perspective, they're doing all what they can to try and make sure they meet their obligations. So it is a question of how long this goes on. Yeah. Either the money has to come through, because ultimately you can't say otherwise the entire asset side you can't claim is liquid for them to sort of liquidate and pay off all the obligations. So there has to be at some point of time that people come back to give them money, or some other things would happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just digging deeper into what is the resolution to this. Who is accountable for this? I mean, is it the auditors? Is it the promoters? Is it the shareholders? Or would you say that, the last mile accountability lies with the central bank when it comes to purely liquidity and the lack of confidence in the system? I mean, could they have taken any specific actions to not have an IL&FS or a DHFL or an ADAG group happen?
If you go back 6-9 months, you would, and if you looked at the numbers and how exactly they were performing in terms of ability to pay on time, liquidity position, I think everything would look okay. Month by month, as the taps started sort of going off, I think things have started to sort of come off the rails. And you can't point fingers at one particular stakeholder. I think ultimately the board of each of these companies is the custodian. So they look at the auditors, they look at what the management tells them, and ultimately the board takes a call in terms of what the situation of the company is and recommends appropriate action. The central bank goes by the data they get received, and to some extent that's a lag indicator, because that goes
True.
after a certain period of time. So we have to you can't, ultimately the board is the body which ultimately has to protect the interest of all stakeholders, whether it's a lender, whether it's a shareholder, whether it is anyone else.
The RBI has been working on fresh norms. Apart from what we saw in the Feb 12 circular revision, which also brought in NBFCs, they've also have been working on, a further framework. What else can they do, or would you like to see when it comes to a framework?
I think what the regulator is putting in place is safeguards for these things not to happen again. Now we are in the event, and we'll have to see how to come through this. And clearly, the resolution has to happen in terms of what are the basic problems. If you take NBFCs, you will have to take, say, what are the big 25, 50 developers, if there is an issue on the developer side, who are facing problems, and who have those exposures, and how do you sort of resolve the underlying asset? The issue is not with the NBFC. The NBFC has lent to certain people, and you got to see, is that
they can't pay up. Yeah.
Is it something which can be resolved? What is the sort of haircut which needs to end? What's the implication for the NBFC? I think there has to be, you got to dive one level lower to see what sort of asset profile some of these large NBFCs have, and is that something which is sustainable for the NBFC to continue business?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at all these different cases. So DHFL has made the full payment just recently. You've got concerns with IL&FS. DHFL still, because you don't know what's going to happen to the company eventually. SL, ADAG Group. The case that we were talking about, PwC has actually resigned from Reliance Capital as an auditor. Indiabulls Group still linger. Do you see more pain ahead for these groups in particular? I mean, are they at the rock bottom of the problem, or do you think, this is just the tip of the iceberg? You don't know what's really going to come out of the cluster?
I think none of us would know.
Yeah.
Only the market is taking a call. So if you look at what the market is saying, is that every day if you see pressure on the stock,
more and more skeletons are coming out.
The market is believing that clearly this is not the end of the road, but that's the market view. I think no one sitting outside can say this is the end of the road, or this is something which things will bounce back from here.
So in Indiabulls in particular, given their attempt to sort of pave the way for that merger with LVB, having been a veteran banker yourself, do you see that happening now?
I think the regulator has to take a call. I don't think none of us will know how, what criteria and what parameters they use to sort of to make that call, and it'll be difficult for any of us to sort of hazard a guess as far as that is concerned.
Sure. A lot of it is also linked to the real estate sector,
correct,
right? Because the larger defaults are from that space. Now, we all know that the real estate sector is in a down slump right now. How soon can we expect a recovery? And do you think it will be a recovery with NBFCs which will lead to a real estate recovery, the confidence coming back which will then rub off on real estate, or would it have to be vice versa? The property market lifts up and then everyone lifts up with it.
If the property market lifts up and people come back to buy houses not just for staying but also for investment, then I think the problems will get solved.
Sure.
But I don't think so that's going to happen in a hurry. So that's why when I said, when you have to look at the underlying asset of some of these NBFCs, it's clearly a call in terms of what is the debt on a particular project, and whether that project and whether the project can service that debt. And if there are things to be done in terms of right-sizing the debt, that needs to get done. Once you do that, then you would know what the position of the lenders are in terms of after the haircut, and then that's when you take a call in terms of what sort of capital requirements are there and what actions need to be taken. But trying to just say that we will continue to sort of move on like this, like we have done for the last 3-4 months, means avenues for funding for NBFCs are just going to contract more and more, and the pain is only going to increase.
So that's exactly what I wanted to ask, that, given the other NBFCs, the smaller one apart from the ones with strong parentage, what happens to them?
So they may be good NBFCs. They may be having business models, whether it's the sort of small business lending, MFI business. A lot of NBFCs are doing reasonably good business, don't have exposure to real estate, don't have exposure to some of the troubled pockets, and possibly have built a business model over the last 3-4 years, which are good. They're going to feel the heat. That's why I'm saying the sooner we resolve some of these issues on the bigger NBFCs, I think it's important for the system to then sort of say, we've put this behind us, and things will be back to normal.
How do you think the government or the RBI along with it would try and address these concerns? Because the government and the RBI have very categorically said that they will not hesitate to take the necessary steps Having said that, they've not spelt out what necessary steps, or we've not seen any definitive action. And I guess that's what the equity markets at least did not like from the last RBI policy when we saw the big sell-off.
So I'm coming back to the same thing.
Sure.
You got to look at the asset profile and the underlying asset. You cannot look at the NBFC and say it's okay or not. You got to look at the asset. So whether you do an AQR type sort of initiative or something else, you got to just say, what do these guys own? Is this okay? And if that's something...
But they own a hard assets. I mean, talking about real estate, be it in India Bulls, for instance, be it the Lodha Group, or
hard assets
on
the book is a particular value, but is the debt
it's
on that...
being leveraged at a different
is the debt on the asset being is something they can service?
But in terms of, the kind of system of cross checks that one can put into place. I mean, the government now talking about a test for, independent board advisors and so forth. There has to be some check. I mean, even in our conversation today, we haven't been able to pinpoint whether it's between the auditors, the directors.
Hey, each one has a role to play. I don't think so. I don't think there's one person who can sort of take ownership of everything, other than the board to say that they are supposed to be the one's custodian of the asset.
No one found out the true value of Satyam books until Ramalinga Raju
So the issue is not that whether it's an auditor or the central bank. So ultimately, everyone has a role to play.
Sure.
The board has to sort of then take a call.
Yeah, absolutely. But just in the larger scheme of things, and I know you may not want to get into details, do you sense that only the large-sized NBFCs, as the market time and again seems to be at least hinting towards that, the HDFCs, the Bajaj Finances of the world, they are the ones which will manage to win the race when it comes to survival of the fittest? Is the smaller ones which could be taken over?
See, the NBFC model is, we're clearly saying you have capital of X and you have leverage of 5X, whatever, 5 to 10X, whatever the leverage is. And clearly availability of money, however good you are, meaning Lehman was just a liquidity event. So if money, if you're not able to raise funds to sort of keep a business going, irrespective of how good your assets are, you will have an issue. And I think that is what the smaller NBFCs will face.
Will some of them turn into banks? Do you see that happening?
See, when you have when there's a crisis of confidence in terms of the NBFC, the banks become one level higher.
No, what I'm trying to ask is, are the larger ones too big to fail, or could this entire crisis hit them too in any small manner?
I doubt, because I think they are much stronger groups. I think they have enough assets on the balance sheet which is monetizable. They have other business. So
that's exactly what I was.
So I don't think so. Though they are at risk. So that's why I'm saying the more and more money will gravitate to them. So if you look at the entire system as of now, whether it is banks or NBFCs, you can count the number of people on the fingers of your hand who are going to get all the resources to do all the activity. Whether they can carry that load or not is something which we will
find out in due course.
We'll find out in due course. Not easy, but I think that's where we are headed. So you are going to have a set of banks, a set of NBFCs who are just going to sort of get all the resources to do all what they can, whether it's capital or whether it's debt. They would have all the resources to do all what they can.
Sure. Okay, so net, Mr. Srinivasan, because you haven't given me a clear answer on this.
Yeah, the clear answer is look at the asset profile. That's the only thing will tell you whether there's an issue or not and how much they can stand on their feet.
But do you see further risk from corporate India, to NPAs, to NBFCs?
The cycle is not over.
Cycle's not over. That's what I wanted to hear.
The cycle is not over.
Okay.
The cycle is not over.
Okay.
And one message perhaps for the regulator and the Reserve Bank, what is it that they can do at their end to try and get the confidence back in the system?
So I don't think so the regulator or the government should, liquidity is there, and liquidity, people will find liquidity if they want to do business. If today a bank wants to lend,
confidence and
so it is just a question of credibility and confidence and how they do it. I think the mechanisms, they know better, and I think they'll have to do it as quickly as they can, otherwise this sort of slow poison will continue.
Wow. Okay.
Great. Always enlightening speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time out.